Yeah, we have quick survey, which you can access through the program book, and we'll put the link there for you. The presentations, of course, will be updated to our website, and you can get visibility to it after. The program book is actually very important because you can find the schedule, the speakers, the sessions, the surveys, the QR codes for each of these sessions. If you're a PMI member, of course, we will, and you submitted your PMI ID, we will report those main sessions for you. Now, the track sessions you go to, you will have to report those, but the PMI codes are in the program book, or if you need information, you can ask the VP for professional development. And of course, we have a raffle. Did I say raffle? But you have to be present to win. So stick around, and we have some great prizes. Now, without further ado, I am proud to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Scott Carbona. A little about Scott, because he has a long, impressive resume, so I'm just touching on a tip of these. Scott Carbona is an award-winning international keynote speaker, author, and consultant who is really passionate about engaging a company's greatest asset. It's people, it's us. Scott is known as the leadership therapist, so I know you're all gonna feel really good when you leave this session today. As a diverse background from serving as an award-winning crisis counselor to executive chief of staff, multi-million-dollar company. As a consultant, Scott guides organizations through technology and leadership changes, culture initiatives, and more. Scott has spoken for such esteemed groups as Walmart, AT Global, and federal government, with rave reviews for his high energy and practical takeaway. Scott breathed life into topics, including employee engagement, change management, communication, self-care, wellness, mental health in the workplace, customer service, and more. And I think we all need that feel good in these times. So now it's my pleasure. Welcome, Scott. You're on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that kind introduction. Let me lower the expectations now. Now, I'm actually from Chicago originally. I spent most of my life there. I was born there. And I can tell you, I wish I were there with you right now. So many of my loved ones are in Chicago with you. Lou Malnati and Portillo's are two of my favorites. Anyway, I don't have a lot of time, so I do want to get started. I'm going to go quickly, but I do want to allow time for a lot of questions at the end and comments. And I'm going to have those who are helping support me in the comment section. When I ask questions, I'm going to ask you to respond in the chat session so they can read me the comments, so I'm not clicking and going blind and crossing my eyes. Project management. Full disclosure, I'm not smart enough to be a project manager. There's a lot of details that go into that, and I don't consider myself the most detail-oriented person. But I do know that you have incredibly robust processes, and your world deals with a lot of ambiguity, but you also deal in a world of facts, like timelines are facts, or at least they should be. Budgets are facts, or again, they should be. I'm going to take you to a different world today, because I believe the greatest challenge for successfully managing projects resides on the people side of change. According to Gartner a few years ago, they said 70% of all projects fail to receive full ROI as a result of implementation. And the reason is, it's not because bad project management skills, bad project leaders, it's not because you didn't have the latest tools and technologies to manage your project. It's because of resistance. It's failing to get buy-in at every single level. So that's where I want to talk with you today. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start to share my slides. So give me a minute here while I squint a bit and try to find exactly where I am. Oh, here I am. Wonderful. Found it. Okay. I'm going to give you a little bit about my background so you understand that just like you have a bias, we all have natural biases. I'm going to tell you where I came from, and I'm going to go through it quickly. This is not really a sales piece, but I just think you need the context. Let's see, there's the right button. Okay. So I learned about change and engagement and how those two work together when I was a crisis counselor. I started off right out of college. I was a residential live-in social worker for 6 to 9 juvenile delinquents. Now, let me say that again, because it's still early in the morning. When I was 21 years old, the age when many of you were still mastering the fine art of beer pong, I was the legal guardian to a gaggle of delinquent children. And I thought, this is what people do. I'm young, this is the world, I have the right degrees for this, so I'm all equipped. And then an 18-year-old boy whispered in my ear at bedtime, and he said, I could kill you in your sleep. I thought he was joking. About 2 weeks later, he tried. And I realized that, maybe having all the right degrees doesn't give you common sense and that God-given sense of fear when you should maybe be a little fearful. From that job, a few years later, I moved into direct care where I did crisis counseling in the homes where there were cases of abuse and neglect and delinquency. And these are the ones you hear on the nightly news. I had a woman who put her toddler daughter in a kennel so she could go out to the bars at night. I had a man who gathered up his 6 children in the kitchen after school one day, and he said, hey, I want to show you something. And he reached behind the door and he grabbed a shotgun and he blew his brains out in front of them, just scarring them terribly for life. And what I learned is that, when they say change or die, some people would rather die than change. Now, I took those skills and then I started working in HR at Healthcare Service Corporation. Being from Chicago, you know it's the parent company of Blue Cross Blue Shield of, a whole bunch of kids. And after a year or so, I got the attention of the executive vice president there at the time over all of operations. And he said, what you're doing on the HR corporate level, we need a lot more attention in our division because the division is 75% of the employees and they had very different needs. So I started off doing employee engagement, customer engagement, change management, strategic communication, and eventually became the executive chief of staff. So I was using the same skills around change management and engagement, just at a different audience. And I kind of look at it as the people in corporate America, they often dress much nicer than the people I worked with as a social worker, but some of the problems are the same. It's resistance, it's confusion, it's fatigue. And now I'm in the phase of my life where I'm a consultant, I'm a speaker, I'm an author, and I get to work with groups that I'm passionate about helping, groups that many of them are groups that have helped me grow as an individual and as a leader. And so I'm happy to share back. So that's my context. So you know where I'm coming from. You might look at me as the warm, fuzzy social worker type. Okay, granted. I'm also incredibly pragmatic, which is what I'm going to share with you today around a lot of stories, because personally, I learn a lot more. The lessons tend to stick if there's a story with it. It's why we can remember, a funny stand-up comedian's joke much longer than you can remember the numbers on a spreadsheet. So with that said, I'm going to ask you to stand up. And if you don't, obviously I'm not watching, I don't know. But I think it would just be good to get your blood flowing if you were to stand up. And I want you to do this. I want you to take your index finger and I want you to point it to the ceiling above your head. Now let me back up here a little bit so you can see a little more of my finger. Okay, I want you to point your index finger to the ceiling and keep your eyes right there on the tip of your finger. Now I want you to start rotating it clockwise, about the size of a basketball, right above your head. Just keep it spinning and keep your eyes right there on the tip of your finger. Good. Okay. I don't want to lose you with this. Now I want you to lower it so it's just above your eyes and that basketball is spinning right above your eye line. Good. Now this gets complicated. Pay attention. I want you to keep spinning it, but I want you to lower it and lower it to your chest level. And then I want you to lower your face and then watch the tip of your finger. And now I want you to ask yourself this question. Is that finger still going clockwise? It's like magic. Now, some of you, I know it's early in the morning and maybe last night you had a little bit too much fun. So that might be confusing, but all we honestly did here is we changed the perspective. So we went from this orientation to this orientation. And the same is true of circumstances. We don't always have the control over all the circumstances, all the resources, all the pandemics that we have and we don't want. We don't necessarily have control over those things, but we always have control over how we choose to look at them. Now, here's what I want you to do. This is your involvement piece. Go into the chat bar, and I want you to think about all of the changes that are going on right now. I mean, in your job, in your life, in your world right now. And if you could just say one word, this is how I feel about these changes, just type that in there. And I'm going to ask those supporting me to just be in the chat room and read off those words that you come up with. As any professor will tell you, there are no right or wrong answers. It's what you feel is what you feel. I don't know if there's an anonymous setting if you feel something really terrible and tragic and embarrassing, but if someone who is supporting me in this meeting, could you read off some of the comments that are coming in? Okay, tell you what, I'll go out and try to do this on my end. I just hope I know how to do that. Oh, Joe, are you there?
Yeah. Concerned, challenged, excited, optimistic, stressed, uncertain, bombastic, exhilarating, blessed, challenged, overwhelmed, inspired, stressed, puzzled, intransitional, tired.
Okay, yeah, I think you're in the right room. It seems like we all live in different planets, different worlds entirely. We have some people who are blessed, optimistic, full of hope. And then we have some people who are full of dread and they're just worn out and they probably have a hard time getting out of bed. And I understand both of those because a lot of this is always going to become a matter of perspective. But I want to tell you that feel stressed right now, if you probably learned this in college a long time ago, the Rubler-Cost model of the 5 stages of grief. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with this because I don't think it's accurate, but the model is something happens here, poof, and then all of a sudden we go into denial. Oh, that didn't just happen. Then we get angry. Then we try to bargain with the world, the universe, and God and say, please, if you do this, I'll do that. And then we crash into depression, and then finally, we move into acceptance. And here's what I don't like about this. First of all, it appears to be linear, like you start here and then you go here and then you go here. And that's not how it works. We bounce all over the place when we feel grief, and the grief that change can produce in us. Also, it makes it look like acceptance is the pinnacle. It's like we finally arrived. And then, of course, since it's not linear, we then go back into anger or denial or bargaining or depression. It's not based on a calendar, and grief and the change does not look at a calendar. But I want to talk about how we can accelerate ourselves first as leaders and then accelerate others when we are going through this. If I had more time, I would go into detail with all 5 of these of how they have similarities. But I want to focus on this, about that state of free fall. If you remember back into the 70s, and some of you weren't born, Jim Fixx, the name Jim Fixx, probably sounds familiar to some of you. He was known primarily as a marathon runner. He then wrote the definitive book on how running is good for your heart, and it just pumps you up and it's strengthening. He was such a health nut. I don't know if you remember this commercial or the cereal, but Grape Nuts. He did a Grape Nuts commercial talking about how this supports a heart healthy diet, and it must be good for you, right? Because it's a box of rocks and twigs. It must be healthy. And then, and I'm not making light of this, but then he died, and he died of a heart attack. And what was he doing when he had that heart attack? He was running. Poof! Talk about a state of free fall. Now, I can look at that fact and say that what chance does a schlub like me have of having a healthy heart? He's out there running and eating rocks, and he's still dying of a heart attack. I'm going to go right back to the couch and eat chips and binge Netflix. So the problem is when you have nothing to hold on to, you get scared. Catching up with a college friend, I understood that she was divorced, and I said, well, hey, just catch me up in your life. She said, well, married, 2 kids. I brought the second one home from the hospital. She was 3 weeks old, and then my husband came home. And I had worked 2 jobs to pay him going to medical school, grad school, all the schooling. And he came home and he said, honey, I am so excited. Something wonderful has happened and I can't wait to tell you. She said, what is it? And he said, I met someone and I'm in love. Yay. What do you do with that? See, what she did is she had built her mindset and her life and her future around this concept that went poof. I love this quote from American futurist. It's not so much that we're afraid of change or we're so in love with the status quo, but it's that place in between that we fear. It's like being between trapezes. You have to let go of one before the next is even in your line of sight. And there's just nothing to hold on to. So picture Linus and his hands when his blanket's in the dryer. I mean, there's an incredible feeling of insecurity and fear. And that's what change does for us. It puts us in a state of free fall where we don't have all the answers. Here's what I think change looks like. And I've adapted this model and I love it because I think it explains it much better. But I was part of the C-suite and I remember the CEO talking about an upcoming change and he'd say, current state, future state. Here's where we are today. Here's the current state, the current realities, and here's what we're going to do as a result of it. Any questions? Yeah, a lot of questions, because most of what goes on in times of change is hidden. It's like an iceberg. You see a little bit of it, but there's a lot beneath the surface. And you know this, even before a change is officially announced, there are rumors, there's speculation. You're observing that people are closing doors, they're whispering, they're looking stressed. So you get a sense, just like a dog does. A dog picks up on all of your emotions. So a lot of what goes on happens after a decision is communicated. But as soon as you have confirmation, the first thing that we think to ourselves is, what is over? What am I going to lose out on here? I mean, something has changed. So it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. It's like you find out that you're having a baby. You're like, yeah, oh, you know what's over? It's staying out till 4 in the morning, eating pizza and sleeping on your buddy's couch. Yeah, that's over. Okay, that's gone. So it kind of puts us into a place I like to think of as Meville. Now, if you've ever gone to a tropical vacation, you know, you might sit on one of those flotation devices. You might paddle yourself up to the bar that's right there in the middle of the pool, and you get one of those drinks with the little umbrella and you're just sipping on it and you're floating, and it's 10 in the morning. You know, it doesn't matter, you're on vacation. So you do this what, once, twice a year, so you might as well enjoy yourself. That's a vacation. Now I got to tell you, if you are sometime during the next week on the job and you are sitting anywhere with an alcoholic beverage at 10 o'clock in the morning, that's not called a vacation. That's called a drinking problem. And that's a very different animal. So the point I want to make is Meville is where we all go when we're stressed and when we're insecure. The problem is the people that we're leading, the people that we're trying to help, where do they go? What do they hold on to? Where are they looking? They're looking at you. So yes, you have to explore your own Meville moments, but you can't live there. Now, in this process, we spend a lot of our time right here. We go into like pause mode and we lock into our fears and our disasters. That's catastrophizing, right? We look at what is the worst thing that could happen. Oh my goodness, this is done, this is done, this is done. And we start to stress and we start to obsess and we stay here for quite a while. See, that's unfortunate because change isn't taking place in a positive way when we're fixated there. Now, the Kubler-Ross model would take us here and say, acceptance. Finally, we got to a place of acceptance. But acceptance is really the farthest point from the security of yesterday, you know, where you felt confident and you knew what you were doing and what you were supposed to be doing, and hope that tomorrow is going to somehow magically be better. So it's compliance, but it's not with any sort of joy. So I don't want to leave you there. What happens is we have to move to a place where that grief converts into gratitude. And that takes a while for a lot of us. I think back to a visit. I was in Chicago. I was doing some training with the federal government. I got there a week early with my wife and we stayed with my parents in the suburbs. And we had a wonderful time. And the cab was supposed to pick me up, or the car was supposed to pick me up at 2 in the afternoon. to take me to Chicago so I could, walk around, get rested, get a good night's sleep, and start the week off in training. And well, the car didn't come. So I called and he said, oh, I totally forgot. Let me send for another car for you. So I had an extra hour with my parents. And so we just sat around. We took pictures, we laughed, we joked. Finally, we got in the car. The next morning, as I was training, my wife got a call because I turned my phone off. And it was news that my father had passed away in the night. And now, I'm not saying I magically just got better and got over it. No, the grief model completely applies here. But it didn't take me long to get to the point where there was no frustration over the car not coming on time, because that gave me 1 extra hour where all I was doing was sitting and being in the moment and enjoying my dad. And what helped me in the grief was the gratitude that I had that time with my dad. I had one last hug. I had one last I love you. And I was able to wave to him as the car drove away. Now, ironically, my brother, who lived in another state as well, he was in town on business too. And what his plan was, is he was going to see my parents on the other end of the trip. So he had been in town for several days, but he never got a chance to see my dad. You see why I could say I had a reason for gratitude. Now, going back to my college friend whose husband found someone, was in love, and they got divorced, I asked her how she handled it. And she said, it was really tough at first. I'm not going to lie. But I'm to the point now, because that was years ago, where as miserable as it was, I'm grateful that he gave me 2 wonderful children that mean the world to me. And I would never do anything to wish that away. Plus, as a result of how he treated me, I met a man who loves me and my children as much as I could ever dream possible. And if it weren't for my first husband, I would never know what it's like to be truly loved. Now, do you see how the circumstance is terrible, right? But how we frame it and what we tell ourselves about the circumstance makes all the difference. So let me skip into it. This is the antidote for the fatigue we feel in change. It is to become engaged. And I'm not going to go into all of these, but you can read one of my books where I lay this out in a lot of detail. But all of these things, when you see a person operating with all 6 of these things, you know that that's an engaged person, and you know that that's a person that has a lot of resilience, and they're not going to wear out anytime quickly because they are perfectly pumped. And let me just talk about happiness, because that seems so vague, right? Happiness is cheap. I could make you all happy right now if I could magically make a bottle of tequila appear in front of you and just say, keep sipping, and I guarantee you'll be happy. And you might be until you passed out. The problem is that's not healthy. It's not sustainable. It's not going to make you a better project manager. It's not going to make you a better leader. It's not going to make you a better person. It's certainly not going to make you healthier. So don't do that. But I'm not talking about that kind of happiness. I'm talking about the kind of happiness that's on the inside and it's bubbling, and it can't wait to explode outwardly. And we do that. Like, for example, you think about the day before a winter holiday, there are presents coming for all of the kids, right? Now, these are kids that you have to drag by the hair to get out of bed on a school day. However, on the eve of a present receiving event, those children have a built-in alarm clock and they spring out of bed at like 4 a.m. How is that even possible? It's because there's something on the inside, and they have passion and they have excitement about it. And that fuels their energy. I'll tell you the biggest killer, I mentioned mindset. The biggest killer is a fixed mindset. When we have a fixed mindset, it kills our engagement. And let me tell you what I mean by this. It's an outside-in perspective. This is how I heard it. It's perhaps an apocryphal tale, but there's a man named Walt, been married for 60 years. His wife, Martha, says, I'm going to go to the market. Are there some things you want me to get? And he says, I'm just going to sit here and do some thinking. So Martha goes out to the car. She realizes she forgot her coupon. So she comes back in, and Walt is in the chair where he was, but she hears him sobbing. And she gets closer to him, and Walt is just wiping his eyes. And she says, Walt, what's wrong? He said, there's nothing wrong. Please just leave me. I need to think. And she says, no, if you're sitting here and you're crying, there's something terribly wrong. You either tell me or I'm going to call for help. And he said, fine. I was just thinking about when we first got together. We didn't have 2 nickels to rub together. We bought this old home. We fixed it up the best way we could. And we raised 3 boys under this roof. And you never left my side. And then I was thinking, well, you remember when I lost my job? And she nodded sadly. Said, we didn't know how we were going to do it. How are we going to keep afloat? And every night before I closed my eyes and sleep, yours was the last face I saw. And then more years passed. We cashed in our savings, our retirement. We took out a second mortgage on the house, and we bought a business. And you and me, we ran it as best friends for as long as we could until we lost that too. And every morning, yours was the first face I saw when I awoke. And now more years have passed. I've started to lose my hair, my hearing, and my health. And so I was thinking, and Martha now has tears just streaming down her face. And she says, Walt, tell me, what is it that you're thinking? And he said, I'm beginning to think you might be bad luck. Now that's certainly one perspective. You could see where he came up with that, but he just as easily could have said, look, you're the reason I have any life or joy left in these bones. Do you see how perspective changes things? So we do this all the time. We don't do it necessarily consciously, but we tell ourselves, I could engage, I could be happy, I could be dynamic, if only, and then what? We had a different mayor, a different governor, a different president, and lived in a different state, made more money, had studied something different in school, had married better, whatever it is. We lay waste our power when we look out there to something magical that's gonna change, and all of a sudden that we'll be happy. The problem is we go with us wherever we go. So it's not the way it works. So I will tell you that engagement, especially in your role right now with a lot of ambiguity, it starts here, it starts now, and it starts with you. So that's where I want to start. Every time you get in an airplane, they say, put on your own mask. If you don't put on your own mask, it's pretty obvious, right? You're going to pass out, you're going to die. And if that happens, that's not good. But also, if you care about someone else, how are you going to be of assistance to anyone else? So today I want to focus this on you, where you are. And by doing this, you will be able to bring new engagement to the teams that you support and that you work with. Now, see, if you are no good to anyone else, and you do burn out. Burnout takes 2 ugly forms. The first one is you could burn out and leave. You could say, I don't want to do this corporate thing anymore. I don't want to be a project manager anymore. I'm done. I'm walking away from all this. And the problem is, if you do, you might not realize it, but you have a lot of blessings in your life right now in your role and surrounding you that you would miss on. You would miss out on those daily moments of encouragement. They might not feel like much, but they're there and they sustain you as much as possible. And if you leave, again, you're going to go with you. And then you're going to start all over again, where you're probably going to discover some of the same problems. So yes, you could burn out and leave, and that's sad. But what's even worse is if you burn out and stay, because that looks a lot like this, right? In case of an emergency, get the hell away from me. I got mine. I'm taking care of me. Look, you might as well go work for the DMV, because your soul has left your body. Okay. You have to plug in, and when you decide to disconnect and you stay, you're just sucking up pay. You get 100% of that paycheck, and you're giving less than 100% of your best, and that's terrible. That's soul sucking for both you, your projects, and the people that work around you. So how do we avoid being that road warrior, that retired on active duty? We do it by engaging where we are now. I'm going to give you 5 very quick tips. The first one we know from positive psychology is this: you always have to have something positive on the horizon that you're looking forward to. This is my daughter when she was 5. Her favorite thing in the world was dessert. She's now a teenager, and she's kind of lost the sweet tooth, which is nice. I remember on a Sunday afternoon, we went for a hike, and it's something we do most Sundays. It's a 4-mile hike. It's like the first mile is up, and then a mile down, and then a mile up and a mile down back to the car. And we got done with that first mile, and she looked at me and she said, carry me. She was just done with this walk. And I said, let me tell you, you got to have something to look forward to, sweetie. I said, so what is it that you're looking forward to? And she said, this hike being over. I'm like, yeah, okay, I set myself up for that. I said, but what's today? And she said, it's Sunday. I said, what do we do every Sunday? She said, we go to church. I said, okay, besides church, what? She said, well, I don't know. I said, Sunday, it's Sunday night. And then she thought for a moment, and then she said, it's dessert night. Now, you might not have dessert night in your home, but my kids grew up believing that the Constitution guaranteed dessert after every single meal. So what we decided is, instead of saying no to desserts, we will just make it Sunday night. I don't care if you've been naughty or nice, you live in this family, we're going to take turns picking dessert, and then we'll all enjoy it every Sunday night as a family. So you get the best of both worlds. So now she realized it's dessert night. And then I said, yeah, and you know that after this hike, you and me, we're going into the Piggly Wiggly, and you get to pick out what the rest of us are going to have for dessert tonight. And she thought for a moment, her eyes looked off, and she lifted her arms and she screamed, pie and ice cream. And then she ran 3 miles back to the car. See, she didn't lack strength or energy. What she lacked is motivation. No, I didn't bribe her. We didn't have cake and ice cream right there on mile 1. And I said, now you promise you're going to, now that's a bribe. What I did was I reminded her of something that was already built into her environment, that was already going to happen. But what I did is I brought it to the forefront of her mind. So she was now thinking of that instead of thinking of 3 more miles. I work in healthcare a lot with a lot of hospice groups and home care groups, and I know countless situations where people have outlived their so-called expiration date because they were looking forward to the birth of a child or a grandchild. Having something to look forward to pulls us forward. Research shows us this, that they hooked up a couple of different university studies. They hooked people up, volunteers, to all sorts of equipment on their brains. And they said, okay, we're going to test the equipment for a minute, but what we want you to do is we want you to think about watching your most favorite movie. And then we'll get back to you and start the exam in about 10 minutes. Well, that was the actual test. They wanted to know if people sat there and thought about watching their most favorite movies, what would happen? And what they discovered is the average participant increased their own endorphin levels by 29%. By replaying the tapes of a movie they've already seen, not watching it, but just thinking about watching it, they were able to release happy chemicals that flooded their system, and that makes us feel happy. It makes us more resilient. It makes us more impervious to criticism. It's like a beer without the empty calories. I mean, it's a confidence booster. We know from research there are other things that also release endorphins. You know, exercise, getting your heart rate up for 20 minutes a day, that is going to release some endorphins. Hot and spicy foods, that's one of my favorites. That if you got sweat on your lip, it's coming down your scalp, that's how you know you're doing it right. That releases endorphins. Sex, having sex releases endorphins. Now, the 4 things I mentioned, you probably can't do all 4 of those things at work and keep your job. So I'm not suggesting that, but no one is going to tell you, you can't just take a pause and think about something on the horizon, or even something that happened behind you that can elevate where you are right now and move you forward. So it has nothing to do with how much it costs. It has nothing to do with any of those things. It has to do with your ability to schedule it, to make it happen, and then to savor it while you're doing it. So it could be having a cup of coffee in the morning with a friend, a colleague. It could be ending your week, sharing a bottle of wine with a good friend or your soulmate. You schedule it, you hold it, you do it, and then you immediately then schedule the next event. Okay, let's make this practical now. If you were a dog, what would make your tail wag? So think about today, this weekend, next month, next year. Out in the chat room, I want you just to real quickly share. So what is it? What's on the horizon for you? That is something that you can use to lock you in and say, yeah, that is on my horizon. That is what I'm looking forward to. I'm just going to give you a minute to share, and Joe is going to read some of your responses for all of us. I'll go first while you're typing. I'm going for a hike as soon as this is done, and I'm really looking forward to it. Here in North Carolina today, it's bright, it's sunny, and it's about 45 degrees, and that's like my sweet spot weather. Joe, do we have any comments?
Here you go. Morning walk, a crafting weekend, swimming, vacation, my workouts, going to a play, team dinner next weekend, evening walk, seeing grandson, trip to Costa Rica in 2 weeks for a wedding. I'm in. Holiday break, daughter's first school project, dinner with my best friend, hiking.
That's awesome. That's all. Okay. I just, that's a great sampling. I want you to do one more thing now. I want you to think about something that you're looking forward to that involves another person, and real quickly pull out your phone. I want you to text that person that you're doing something with and that you're looking forward to doing something with and saying, hey, I just thought of this and I can't wait to spend time with you doing whatever. By doing this, here's what you're going to do. When I asked you earlier about sharing how you feel about a certain change, we know from positive psychology research that a stress or a sorrow shared is a sorrow halved, right? So by letting someone else share our burdens, it kind of lightens us a little bit. We also know from positive psychology research that a joy shared is a joy doubled. So depending on what you're looking forward to with that person on the horizon, you're going to spark joy in that person remotely right now. And that's a pretty powerful tool to have. That gives you both a sense of anticipation that can help fuel you over the speed bumps of anything between now and that event. And by the way, don't just have everything out there like a year from now. There are things that can happen in small doses, like I can't wait to get off my feet, right? I can't wait for this movie to come out next month, or it can be small. It could be dinner, or in my daughter's case, it could be dessert night. You get to choose that. Tip number 2 is this. I want you to surround yourself with the right people. You got to be careful who you rub up against because they're going to rub off on you. I'm guessing many of you have seen the movie Scarface based on your age. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. But just in case you haven't, let me tell you 3 things we know about Scarface. Scarface is really known for gratuitous violence, glorification of the Miami drug culture, and the generous dropping of the F-bomb. That's all that we really need to know to understand how this principle works. So in high school, I went to this movie with my buddy Gary. We came out of the theater and he said, "What did you think?" And I said, "Man, that was effing awesome." He said, F and A. And I said, "Let's go get some effing food." And we kept talking like effing that until we got back to my effing house. And my mom asked me an effing question. And guess what came out of my mouth? Yeah, I dropped an F-bomb right there on my mom. Now I should explain, I was not raised in an F-friendly home. Okay, I didn't attend an F-friendly church. But what happened is, in the course of that movie, 206 F-bombs rubbed up against my ears. That's one F-bomb every 29 seconds, and I was nearly forever effing changed. And that's when my mom introduced me to Tabasco sauce, which is probably why I have such a high heat tolerance today. If you wonder, like you come into the office and you're in a good mood and you instantly feel like you have dementors all around your soul, it's because negative emotions are much more contagious. The good news is also this, from a research standpoint, is that the emotions of a leader are more contagious than those of a non-leader. So if you are a negative leader, wow, yowza, that's going to pull down everyone around you exponentially. But if you are a positive leader, you have the ability to lift up those around you. Now, I learned this quite accidentally when I was working at HCSC. I hired this guy who was a creative genius, but if he had a theme song for his life, it would be womp womp. Do you know anyone like that? Look, if you're not smiling to yourself right now, it might be you. You know, I'm just saying, you know, you hide in plain sight, and you would be the last person to know. But the reality, everyone else does. This guy would say, "How was your weekend?" He's like, "Too short." It's like, "How was Disney?" He's like, "Oh, it's too expensive. It's like $10 for a little beer." And I started thinking to myself, I'm in the middle of doing some merger acquisition work. I'm thinking, I'm too tired to spend time with someone sucking my energy. And one day I decided consciously, I'm going to walk a different way to my office. And there I saw this employee named Meredith. Now, Meredith always had a look on her face like she had just done something slightly illegal, like she's hiding. I'm like, what are you doing? She said, nothing, I'm just messing with you. And I went back and talked to her, and we laughed for 10 minutes. She's asked me about my family. Is there anything I can help you with? What's going on in your world? And I realized that time froze when I was spending time with her, because she lifted me up. When I rubbed up against her spirit and her attitude and her behaviors, wow, I lost track of time and I was late to my next meeting. Did you know you already are that for some people? And do you know that there are people around you every day who are that to you, but you just might not have brought it into a conscious level? So I'll just say to you, you need to be very conscious as a leader. Just like my daughter, pie and ice cream was what it was all about. As a leader, here's what you need to think about. If ice cream is your thing, I want you to stock your own freezer. You get to choose whom you attract and bring into your life, and also those that you repel. Now, I know you sometimes you're given a project team. You don't get to pick all the people you want to work with. What that means is you just have to be able to limit those that you give your emotional energy to. Spend as much time as you can around those people that build you and they are building in the same direction. And then just be a little more selective with how much time and emotional energy you expend on those that you don't want. And I would suggest you do this outside of your job too. Repelling your emotional energy. I got to be honest, for 2 years, I have not had the television news on. I don't watch the news. I read it. I get a digest. I get a nonpartisan, non-agenda fold. I know what's going on in the world at a very high level. And if I'm interested, I click for the details. But I don't really need anything that's going to make me hateful, angry, scared, bitter. I mean, every time I look, even scanning the headlines, you know, there's an Eiffel Tower sized asteroid coming to Earth in December. Woohoo! Look, tell me something I can do something about, not something that's kind of interesting, but yet irrelevant, because it's not going to hit us. You get to choose where you invest that emotional energy. Number 3 is develop a mantra. A mantra is a short, sticky phrase or saying that we lean on to pull us over humps. And I got this idea as I started thinking about, there's a research study I read where a proctor pulled in Asian women into a room and said, there's a 30-minute timed math test in front of you. When I say go, go. In the first room, the proctor said this, you know, it just dawned on me that you're all women. Well, no one expects women to do as well as men, so do your best, go. In the next study, they had the same demographics. Asian women were in the room. Proctor said, it's a 30-minute test, it's math. When I say go, go. And then the proctor said something different. The proctor said this, you know, it just dawned on me that you're all Asian. Well, everyone just assumes that Asians do better than non-Asians when it comes to math. So prove them right, go. Which group do you think did better? See, the first group was told, you can't, and here's why. And the second group was told, you can, and here's why. After the tests were done, the second group scored statistically significantly higher on the same test. Why? Because in the back of their mind, they were driven by, I can, and here's why. That's a mantra. Be careful of the mantra you tell yourself, you're going to believe it. Be careful of the mantra you let others tell you, because you're going to believe it. Be careful of the mantra you give others, because they are also going to believe it. So I would say this is your homework. What mantra do you need right now in your own life, wherever you are? With as many people who are out there on this Zoom meeting right now, there is someone who is in full-blown addiction, or someone who is a loved one is struggling with a drug or an alcohol addiction. There is someone going through a terribly messy breakup. There is someone out of work and feeling desperate. There is someone going through some financial woe. There is someone who has a serious health issue you might not have told anyone about. Some of you are taking care of sick and ailing loved ones, parents, children. Look, everyone is going through something. You need a mantra to pull you, not just a day at a time, but sometimes it's a moment at a time. That's positive homework. And I think the mantra that we've come up with as a family, the last 2 years, we've used the same one. It's called love first. And what that simply means is I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to do things. I don't know if this is right or this is right. I don't know who to vote for here, here, or here. But I do know that our first priority should be to love first and give people the benefit of the doubt. That was my mantra. And that helped me from getting distracted and keeping me out of the weeds. The second thing is, as a project leader, as a team leader, as a leader, what mantra does your team need? How can you use a mantra to inspire them? Years ago, I took this picture. You may recognize it. It's the old Chicago Public Library building. It's now like Chicago Cultural Arts Center or something. It's a corner of Randolph and Michigan. I took my family there. It was a very overcast day, and I was lying on the floor to take this. And this is one of the largest Tiffany stained glass domes in the world. And I was amazed at how, even though it was overcast outside, it didn't take a lot of light to make this thing pop. And that's the beauty of, well-made stained glass. And I took this picture and I had it framed for a client I was working with in hospice. And I called this Be the Light. And I challenged them, you know what, be the light to someone today. That is actually a positive psychology, research proven tip on how we feel better about ourselves. And that is helping someone who can't help themselves. So I did this session, and one woman told me about a month later, she said, I went home discouraged because she was a CNA. Now, if you don't know healthcare and you don't know what a CNA is, well, they do bedpans, they do sponge baths, they change sheets. They are just CNAs, and they're told they're just CNAs by nurses and doctors and other people around them because they are sometimes thought to be the lowest rung on the totem pole. And this woman said, I was discouraged because I'm just a CNA. See, that's what she had been told, and that's what she believed. And then she thought, you know what? I spend so much time with my clients. I know them better than anyone else. And she started thinking about this woman in her care named Edna. Edna was 86 years old, terminally ill, didn't have long to live. And she knew that Edna was a lifelong Atlanta Braves fan. What that CNA did is she went home, she found a contact for the Atlanta Braves, and she reached out and she explained Edna, lifelong fan, a quick note from you would make her day. She was overwhelmed when a package arrived 3 days later. It had a team photo, which I don't have licenses to use, so I'm not using it. It had a baseball. It had a tomahawk. And there's a personalized note that said, we understand that you've been a lifelong fan. Well, we are your biggest fan, Edna, and we're dedicating our very next game to you. Now, just a CNA reached out to who? The owner of the Atlanta Braves? No, probably just a college intern. And both of them felt empowered enough to do something meaningful and magical. And when I attended a meeting the month later with this hospice group, and she shared this story, she showed a picture of this woman wearing an oversized Atlanta Braves jersey and holding the tomahawk. And her toothless smile was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. She passed away 4 days after the photo was taken. You know, it's amazing if we use a mantra like be the light, and we look for ways to rub up against people and elevate them in the process. It doesn't just transform those people. It transformed the CNA and what she thought about her role and how she could love deeper. As a result, making her feel more deeply loved. What mantra do you need? Tip number 4, we're almost wrapped up here. Find good things. Look for good things throughout your day. I practiced this as the chief of staff. I was responsible in other things. I had large leadership meetings across the country that we would hold. We had a supervisor conference my team was planning. It had about 2,000 supervisors across multiple states, and we were meeting in Richardson, Texas. Right before we got there, heavy rains had flooded the women's room next to the ballroom. And most of the supervisors in this group were female. So there's no way you could take a 10-minute break and get people in and out on schedule. So we were sitting there trying to figure out this dilemma. And I just told one of my leaders, one of my managers, I said, look, you're smart people. You'll figure it out. Just call me when you have an answer and we can make sure to announce it. About 15 minutes later, my phone rang. My manager said, hey, come to the men's room next to the ballroom. So I walked over there and I saw a sign and it said, women's room now instead of men's room. And then it said men's room downstairs, and there was an arrow to the escalator. And I said, okay, yeah, okay, that'll work. Now, when your voice goes up like that, it means it's not okay. It's going to be problematic because, what are you thinking? You're a woman and you're going to walk into, until recently was called a men's room. What are you going to see? Yeah, you can't not see that. It's right there. It's obvious. And my manager said, no, I know what you're thinking. Come on. And she grabbed me by the hand and she led me inside. And she was so pleased with herself when she showed me this. Da-da! Talk about if you can't fix it, feature it. They loved it. Women were getting their pictures taken with the spray of flowers, like right next to the urinals, which proves they had no idea what those really were. This became the talk of the conference. People were sending me pictures months later. One of our vice presidents talked to me at dinner and she said, Scott, did you engineer that whole thing in the bathroom? And the reason she did it is because the conference I was running was called Innovation in Times of Change. And I said, yes, last night I sent the rains. Tonight, locusts. Now, see, that's I'm not God, okay? I don't have that kind of power, but I did have that power by meeting with my team. I was constantly challenging them to not bring me problems, but bring me exciting things, bring me solutions. Yes, certainly you have to bring me problems when there's something wrong, like the bathroom was wrong, but I want you to take ownership and feel good about what you come up with. So just real simply, here's what I suggest. There are 3 times a day you can prime your own positivity pump. Look, instead of starting your day in the shower, thinking about all the things you have to get done, what is it that you want to see during the day? What is it that you hope to see your team members doing? What behaviors, what actions, what results do you want them to obtain? And then start going out of your way to look for those things. Secondly, throughout the day, be known as the kind of leader who asks what's going well instead of what's going wrong. There are a lot of people who are like a cat bringing you a dead mouse, like, ah, here's a problem. Guess what? Server's down. Haha, we're over budget again. They almost relish bringing you problems. Well, again, you don't ignore problems, but what would happen if you were to recondition them to, instead of just bringing you a dead mouse, to bring you something like, hey, what's going well today? And really challenge them to come up with something positive, because that negativity in the workplace, as you know, it's contagious and it spirals. How can you ask people and direct them to find what's going well? And then finally, end your day expressing gratitude. The father of positive psychology, Martin Seligman, said, if we spent more time investing in gratitude, we'd have less time to invest in worry. And it's so true. I think we would need fewer counselors, fewer sleep aides, fewer bartenders if we did a better job of ending our days on a positive note of telling God, a spouse, a cat, a journal, somewhere, what's going well and what am I grateful for? My wife and I have instituted what I call a demon-free zone. The hour before bedtime is not a time to talk about what's wrong or what's broken or what we need to obsess about. See, we go to bed and then we start thinking about all the things we didn't get done that day and all the things we probably won't get done tomorrow. And then we wonder why we have insomnia. Instead, we invest in laughter. We invest in positivity. We invest in lighter emotions and positive emotions and grateful emotions. And as a result, I'm asleep in 5 minutes. And that's saying a lot for me, because since I started practicing this, prior to that, kind of a basket case, kind of tossing and turning. And now I realized that it was just, I needed to turn off that piece of my mind. And it's a discipline that you can practice as well. The final one is this: keep your sense of humor. This guy's not known as a comedian. You might not even recognize him. Ed Sullivan, from the late 40s to the early 70s, he had the top rated variety show. He wasn't always highly esteemed. In the 1950s, I think it was 1952, Time magazine said, Ed Sullivan has the face of a man sucking a fish. I guess in the 1950s, that's how you would say someone is butt ugly, right? But many people don't know, before he was on TV, he was a boxer. So he had been punched in the kisser several times, but it didn't bother him. Why? Because his job was not to be the talent. His job was to bring Elvis, the Beatles, the Doors, the Stones. He was bringing talented, up and coming acts to show the American people. So that didn't offend him. Then there was one woman who wrote for something that eventually evolved into the TV Guide. And her name was Harriet Van Horn, and she wrote that Ed Sullivan got where he is not by having a personality, but by being devoid of a personality. Now, look, if you're a TV personality, you have to have two things. You got to be on TV and you got to have some sort of a personality. So that's kind of insulting, right? That's like being a disorganized project manager. It's like those things don't go together. Now, he could have gotten upset. He could have written an op-ed piece of his own and toasted her shorts. He also could have used his own platform on TV to tell the world what he thought of her and what a clown she was. He didn't do that. He took the personal touch that so many leaders fail to do today. He went back to his desk and he wrote her a personal letter, and I'd like to think it said, "The desk of Ed Sullivan." And then he wrote, "Dear Miss Van Horn," and then he thought carefully before he penned these poignant words. Now, look, that might not be your sense of humor, right? That might even be offensive to you, so just look away. But you know, what looks like a nasty gram, that wasn't his intent. His intent was actually to say, look, you got your lane, I got my lane. As long as we don't get confused, we're fine here, right? And I know it wasn't a nasty gram, and it wasn't meant as a nasty gram, because Harriet Van Horn said, this was my prized possession. I kept it on my home office wall until after he died. And then I started telling other people about it, because this was the start of a relationship that lasted 22 years until he passed away. They became best friends. Look, you don't get paid to be a comedian. You know, you probably can't like do what they did on The Office, that wonderful TV show that's no longer on, and just, you know, have a movie day and just laugh and tell jokes to each other all day long. But when I go in and I evaluate a company's culture, I'm looking at laughter. First of all, does laughter happen? Secondly, I'm looking for people breaking bread and laughing. You know, it's hard to break bread with someone you don't like and respect. Now, I know you're saying I do it all the time. It's called Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. No, you love those people. That's very different. This is where you voluntarily say, like someone said earlier, looking forward to a team luncheon or dinner or activity. That means you're volunteering to be part of something and you're looking forward to it. If you voluntarily laugh and break bread with people, that tells me that you're engaged. You're truly plugged in. So where there is laughter, and it's the kind of laughter that it's shared by everyone, because it's inside humor, where everyone is an insider, as opposed to one side of the table laughing at another side of the table. Keep your sense of humor. That makes a huge difference to how people show up. And let me end with this. Yeah, you're all good. You're great with projects. You're great with process. You're great with budgets and timeframes and all of those things. But I love the words of the late, great Dr. Maya Angelou when she said, people will forget what you said. And people will forget what you do. And personally, I'm grateful, because I haven't always said or done all the perfect and right things. But people will never forget how you made them feel. This session is dedicated to you, to help you to feel engaged, so you can approach your work and your teams with engagement, and hopefully that will then rub off on all of those around you. If you want more resources, this book, Getting It Right When It Matters Most, co-authored with another organizational development psychologist type person, that came out in June, Manager's Guide to Employee Engagement, and I love The Happiness Advantage by Sean Acher. And I am generous with my time. You connect with me, you send me an email, I am happy to help. Now, I don't know what time it is, because I'm too blind with or without glasses to see what time it is, but I'm going to turn it back to you and see if there's time for any questions, or if we just have to run.
Scott, we only had 2 minutes. You were just going.
Sorry,
So,
the caffeine. Well, is there any question that you have, or that might have come into you, that I can answer in those now minute and a half?
No, I unmute everyone. So there's time for probably 1 or 2 questions. So who wants to go first?
Yura, this is Shamla. I don't have a question, but I just wanted to take a moment to say, Scott, thank you. This was an excellent session.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And I'm not going to argue with you. Thank you.
Okay, So in lieu of the questions, because I know it was a great presentation, thank you, Scott, for sharing all those insights with us. And if folks have questions for Scott, Scott is really reachable, and you can submit it and we will ask Scott to answer those. This was a very insightful presentation. I know I took away a lot, discovering you don't think about grief in that way, because most of us go to the dark side. So that's really good, and really leveraging your personal engagement to strengthen your resilience. So that was all good. So what I'll do, Scott, is we're going to thank you for, we are going to present you with a digital version of our appreciation certificate, and you will get the good one in the mail. This was really, really a good session, and we appreciate you sharing that and kicking off, helping us engage in times of change and this disruption. So this was great. And what we'll do now is actually move to our sponsors. The first one up is actually Lewis University, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. So, yeah. Lewis University, who will share their sponsor comments with us. But some quick reminders. Remember to access the link for the program book. It will guide you through the schedule, the session, the speakers, the QR codes, and all those good things. And if you're a PMI member, complete the form, and we will update your PDU, and of course the survey. We always welcome feedback on how we can improve stuff as we move, for future events and things like that. So now we will ask Dr. Robert Harris from Lewis University, our sponsors, to share his screen and just give us some insight. And thank you again, Scott, and thanks again, Dr. Harris, Lewis University, for supporting us. So you're on now.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. And again, I'm Robert Harris. I'm the program director for the MS Project Management Program at Lewis University. And again, I want to thank everyone at Chicagoland PMI for supporting us and allowing this opportunity today. We're excited about our program for continuous improvement. Why? We have at least 4 points I'd like to share with you today. We provide a master's in project management, which is composed of 10 courses that can be completed within about 18 months. All our courses are taught by project management professionals with advanced degrees in global project management. So they are absolutely there to meet all your project expectations. Our program is reviewed by PMI and also the Global Accreditation Center for course content, global accreditation, global adaptation, and professional career development. If you're looking for a graduate program affiliated with PMI and/or GAC, please give Lewis University a look. Please consider us. So stop by our breakout session today, and we can talk more about our programs at Lewis University. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, and thank Lewis University for continuing supporting us with all our events now. And thank you all for attending our keynote. You still have time for networking or visit our sponsor booth and our chapter partner breakout rooms. And then we will see you back for our morning sessions. So I hope you enjoy the morning, and I look forward to you spending the day with us.
Also, if you have not already completed the survey, please complete the survey. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm closing this session. Did you grab the chat? Okay.
Great job, Scott.